I'm Jack Ruston. Welcome to the Ruston's Boneyard podcast. We're talking about real food, traditional cooking, nutrition, health and exercise. We're asking whether a more primal approach to life brings us further in line with the biology evolution has given us. We'll be exploring some of these topics with expert guests from the worlds of clinical practice and research. I'm not qualified to give any sort of medical or dietary advice, and nothing in this material should be considered as such. The opinions expressed here are for the purposes of discussion only. Please consult a qualified medical professional before undertaking changes to your diet. And now, on with the show. Brian Baxter is a qualified health coach and competitive obstacle course racer. He brings the scientific mindset that's carried him through a successful career in software engineering to the thorny issues of diet, exercise, sleep, and stress management. His social media channels are a trove of insight on the latest research, and we're very lucky to have him here today to share his approach. Ryan, welcome.
Thanks. Yes, I'm happy to be here. And that was an epic intro. I don't think I could have written that myself. So
yeah, I thought you'd like that. So look, the role of a health coach, I mean, this is kind of a new thing, particularly, in the UK. I'm not sure whether the role even sort of properly exists, but it can't be that long-lived to kind of function over in the States either. What is a health coach? What do you do and what do you not do?
I would think that actually most people in the States as well have no idea what a health coach is either, or nor do they know that they could hire a health coach. But yeah, so what do I do? I kind of just view myself as someone who provides general guidance around how to live what I view as a healthy lifestyle. And I think, I obviously have a biased opinion as to what that is. And when I work with people, the first thing I try to do is screen the fact that, we are both on the same page as to what a healthy lifestyle is, or they're at least open to, my interpretation of a healthy lifestyle, right? And so that encompasses things like some of the things you mentioned in the intro there, around sleep, exercise, movement, diet, stress management, and social connection. Those are kind of the 6 pillars that I tend to focus on as health coach. I do not, do things like diagnose people with medical conditions or treat people in any way. I don't have the necessary credentials, knowledge, or schooling to interpret, those types of things and make suggestions to treat people alongside, treat people with a diagnosable medical condition. I haven't come across this situation, but I'm happy to work with a medical professional to help someone implement lifestyle changes that could help address a medical condition, but I can't, treat or diagnose something like that.
Understood. I mean, I assume you find that sometimes when you correct some of the things that you do deal with, that people turn around and say, "Hey, my whatever it is went away, my psoriasis or whatever went away," which I guess is a nice side effect without you being a clinician.
Yeah, and they might. Oftentimes people might have complaints about maybe it's digestion or it's, they're typically not huge medical type of things, but they're just like, things that nag them, that, bother them. They're not going to go to a doctor usually. Or there are things that they've just lived with. And they're like, oh, I noticed, this, like you said, psoriasis, or the complexion of my skin or my digestion or whatever is just slightly better after making several lifestyle changes. So yeah, I mean there's definitely impacts that, and you can there's certainly health coaches that get involved and Someone may be diagnosed with, pre-diabetes or diabetes, and they've been, managing that with their doctor's medical's supervision for a while, and all of a sudden they get involved with a health coach, and the health coach gives them the tools to make dietary changes, and all of a sudden, their diabetes or pre-diabetes gets, much better than it was.
Mm.
And so while the the health coach didn't necessarily diagnose or is formalizing like a treatment plan for them for that specific condition, the downstream effects of living a healthier lifestyle can often have impacts on managing, disease states, especially specifically some of these lifestyle related diseases that we encounter today.
I guess you have to be quite careful, don't you? Because if somebody comes to you, I mean, let's run with that idea of diabetes. If someone comes in and says, "Hey, Ryan, I'd like to work with you, health coaching. By the way, I've got this raging type 2 diabetes, but I'm seeing the doctor for it." And you then say, "Okay, cool. Well, listen, as part of the diet strategy that I've got for you, you're going to eat low carb, let's just say." And then the
Yeah.
doctor says to them, "No, don't do that. Don't eat low carb. That's a terrible idea." I suppose you have to kind of be careful about where you tread.
Yeah. And at least here in the States, each state in the US, they have different laws around this. Some states you can give dietary advice, like the state that I live in, New Hampshire, I'm free to give dietary advice. In other states, you can't say anything. You can't tell anyone about how to eat unless you're a registered dietitian or a medical professional, right? So it gets a little dicey and complicated depending on the state where you live.
So is that the state
uh,
where you live or the state where they live?
State where you live.
I see. So yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So yeah, there's a lot of kind of there's a lot of kind of obviously legal aspects to it, and then there's when you're kind of starting up, I personally made sure to go through and have a lawyer write up a legal disclaimer about what I'm qualified to do, etc., and
Yeah.
all that stuff. But yeah, in if I'm working with someone, I always make sure, if we're going to talk diet and they have some type of condition like diabetes or whatever, pre-diabetes, that I'm going to suggest you do this thing, but you should, I always give that disclaimer, you should talk to your medical professional,
Mm.
about this. And ultimately it's up to them. Like, the individual person has to make the decision of what they want to do. Yeah, their doctor might not agree with the approach, but the individual person also has the right to decide how they want to eat. If they've, I often tell people to look at things in a way of like, if you've been trying something, maybe your doctor's been telling you to eat this way or manage your condition this way, and nothing's improved and you haven't gotten better. Well, what's the harm in trying something different, right?
Yeah.
And that can, be applied across the board, whether you're talking about something like diet or exercise or whatever, or sleep or stress or something like that, right? You can, only try the same thing over and over and over again and expect to see different results. But, at some point you got to accept the fact maybe it's not working. Maybe it's not the right approach for you and you need to try something different. So,
Mm. I suppose it's, yeah, I suppose it's frustrating when you see people who maybe have got to a point, almost a point of no return. And they've been told, they've been told, well, this condition, it's not really, there's nothing you can do about it. This diabetes, you're
mm-hmm.
going to live with this for the rest of your life. And they just crack on regardless. And you're kind of getting there very late in the day at the point where they have nothing left to lose, but they equally have nothing left to gain. Although who knows where that point lies. Okay. So, you mentioned the 6 pillars Maybe you could elaborate a little bit more specifically, and maybe pick a couple of examples of what you see as the big levers. I mean, obviously it's going to vary client to client, but what are the main things you're thinking of, specific things that you're going to try to get people to do when you work with them?
Mm. Um, yeah, this is a tough one because they all kind of interplay as to which one's the most important, and they generally vary from client to client. But um, I think I'm going to start with sleep. I think um, my bias is that if you're not sleeping well, you really can't do anything else, right? You're not going to have the energy to um, move, to exercise. Your energy to invest in diet is not going to be there. Your mental clarity and focus for work, for your family, for that type of stuff gonna go away. You're not going to be the best friend, husband, father, wife, anything like that. If you're not sleeping well. So I think really, if your sleep is really, really, really bad, then that's going to be an issue. That's also the hardest one to really address for a lot of people,
Mm.
unfortunately. It can be such a tricky situation um, to get right, and a lot of people struggle with it. But it is, I think, kind of one of the cornerstones, I think, to everything else. From there, the age-old debate of whether it's diet or exercise is more important. I think that exercise and movement are the two kind of next two that I would say are important. And I specifically keep them separate, right? There's a exercise is not movement, and movement is not exercise. Um, Exercise is like, this is my formal workout. I'm going to go run. I'm going to go lift some weights. I'm going to do whatever. This is the 30 hour maybe time in your day that you specifically set aside to do some kind of pre-programmed movement. Um, Movement, on the other hand, is like I just move throughout the day. I walk, I stand, I'm doing laundry, I'm cooking, I'm just moving around. I'm not, sitting in a chair. And For most clients, this is again another huge struggle because I can't tell you the number of people I just say, hey, how many steps do you usually get a day? And it's 2 to 4 thousand steps, right? And I know steps aren't the best proxy for movement, but it's the best we got, right? And generally, I like to see people kind of in that 8 to 10,000 range for the most part.
It's a pretty good
Um,
indicator, isn't it? Because I mean, if somebody walks 10,000 steps a day or 20,000 steps a day, it says something about them. It says that this is a person that deliberately makes that choice to do that. And the chances are then that you can extrapolate that maybe they spend quite a lot of the rest of the time on their feet as well, just because of that's the sort of person they are.
yeah.
If you walk 2,000 steps a day, it's very unlikely that when your phone is sitting on the counter at home, you're racing around the house.
Right. Yeah. It's pretty. I think it's people don't give it enough credit to just moving around. I'd rather see someone who gets 10 to 15,000 steps a day and skips a workout than does a workout and gets 2,000 steps a day.
Interesting.
Because you're just moving around. You burn far more calories just moving around than you will in that hour exercise session.
Yes.
And chances are you're also probably, not walking 10 to 15,000 steps inside your house. You get outside, you're in nature, you have sun on your skin, you get sun in your eyes. And then just you regulate your appetite, like there's a million different things that just movement and all the downstream effects that has um, is is so much better than say exercise. So I would put, sleep, movement, then exercise if I had to rank them. Just because, the downstream effects of movement, that I just listed off, and that's just off the top of my head, are so impactful everywhere else. You're walking outside, you're probably getting some kind of social connection. If you're walking with someone, maybe you're talking to your neighbors, maybe, whatever, you're going to interact with someone, at some point during your day, if you're moving around. Whereas if you're just sitting still in front of your computer and only getting 2,000 steps, chances of you interacting with another human being in a meaningful way outside of like, Facebook or Instagram or Slack or whatever is probably much slimmer, right? So you can
Social. So it's playing into social connection.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so this is kind of where it also plays into sleep, and because you're moving, you're getting more of that sleep pressure, you're getting sun in your eyes. Hopefully, at some point, that helps set circadian rhythms, and
Yeah.
so like all these things can really play into each
Yeah.
other.
If you take the dog out in the morning, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's interesting, the dog. I mean, we got a dog recently. This just in the summer, we got this dog. And what I've learned about having a dog is that basically it curates you as a human being. When you, provided you have a cute dog, if you have a dog, if you have the dog that looks like it just ate a person, then maybe it works the other way. But with a cute dog, when you go out, it basically says to everyone who sees you, this guy's okay. He's got a cute dog. How bad can he be? He's not a killer. A killer would have a dog like this. There's no chance. That is not a killer's dog. That dog does not have a spiked collar and is not dripping with blood. So this person is okay. And so people that really normally would cross the road when they see you immediately rush up and talk to you about your dog, and you have conversations about dog development, where the dog is in its cycle of either growth, education, or other progress. Yeah, there's definitely that's definitely a combination of movement and social connection.
Yeah, I can see that.
Moving on.
Yeah, moving on, diet, I think, is the next one. And again, it's extremely important. I think this probably gets um, the most attention from everyone, right? Because we look at diet as the end all be all to making yourself healthy, and maybe that's because a lot of people view health as what the number says on the scale, but it's a completely different story. But yeah, my approach to diet is, I learned a long time ago that there is no one diet that's going to work for everyone. I kind of just say to someone that, I really, the framework for the diet that I'm gonna, build upon is just whole foods, right? That's where we're gonna start, right? I want you to eat as much whole, unprocessed, natural foods as you possibly can. What that looks like for you is, that's something we're gonna figure out, right? So certain people, are going to eat more plants. Certain people are going to eat less plants. Some people are going to eat more red meat. Some people are going to eat less red meat, maybe more fish or chicken, or fowl or some kind. Some people are going to do pretty good with fruit. Some people maybe not so much. Other people can tolerate things like legumes. Some people don't, right? And they can do things to varying degrees, right? You can have a little bit of some stuff and not a little bit of other stuff, and so it's just really across the board. I don't I used to be very much in the mindset that low carb, paleo, primal was kind of the diet for everyone, but the more I kind of have been in this space, I don't even think that necessarily low carb is necessary or the right diet for everyone. So I kind of just base it around a whole foods diet, and then we have to go through the tough, the hard part of figuring out what that looks like for that individual person. And that's not set in stone for the rest of your life. Like what works for you today, the diet that works for you today may not be a good diet for you in 20 years from now, or 10 years
Mm-hmm.
from now, or tomorrow even, right? I mean, um, so our bodies are always changing and evolving. So we just need to, my job is to instill the tools for you to figure out how to investigate the foods, or find the foods that are working for you in that moment.
Let me ask you, do you feel that you kind of alluded to this, but do you feel that low carb has gone a bit crazy, that people are actually sort of almost becoming terrified of carbs, and that while there may be people who for whom that's a legitimate position to take, that really it's gone a bit too far and that most people should be incorporating carbs?
I think that I think there are some people that are highly influential in this space that have taken it to an extreme. And I think, unfortunately, that has negative consequences for the people that have been following those people in that space for a long period of time. Um, and I also think there's so much, like, just dogma about this is the one thing for the rest of your life that you need to do, right? And in reality, there's probably very few people that can eat a low carb diet for 365 days a year for the rest of their life, right? Um, and I feel like they feel like they need to do that, right, in order to be healthy. And then when they can't do that for whatever reason, because it's their birthday or their kid's birthday, or Christmas, or whatever, they just feel like they want to have a piece of cake. Um, they feel like they failed. And then because they feel like they failed, then they kind of just throw their hands up in the air and they're like, well, F it, well, let's just go all in. And that going all in results in, weeks and months and
Yeah.
this roller coaster ride. And instead of that, accepting the fact that maybe they could use a little bit more carbohydrate from time to time. Okay. And two, looking at it like this isn't something I don't need to eat this way. For most people, I don't need to eat this way 365 days a year. I can, have the days when I eat a little bit more carbohydrate because I want to, and not feel so bad about that, and not have it negatively affect them at all. Like, whether it's weight loss or their blood sugar control or whatever reason they're trying to eat low carb, like, a couple of days throughout the year, or more, where you have a lot of carbohydrates, are probably not going to be a huge deal. And again, this is in general, right? And if you start to, do some of the other things we talked about, like sleep well and exercise and
Mm.
move a little bit more, then, this ends up being just like those days end up being like a drop in the bucket overall. Um, so I think, yeah, I think to some degree it's gone a little overboard, and we probably need to come back to a little bit more normalcy. um, but I think it's also this like guilt trip that people get put on around eating carbohydrates that is
Mm.
really unnecessary too.
Do you think people? Do you think there are people for whom that they are in a very real way addicted to certain foods, and the low carb health kick, the kind of, oh, you, this is what we should be eating because it's better for our bodies, is actually a way to say, I need to avoid this 100% because I cannot moderate it, and I'm terrified that if I
Mm.
eat, a spoon of raw honey or a handful of berries, what's actually going to happen is that I'm going to eat Oreo cheesecake, and from
Mhm.
now until March.
Oreo cheesecake, yum. Um,
Don't say that.
yeah.
It's not yum, it's evil.
But just as a complete side, I don't know if in the UK, do you guys have the Cheesecake Factory or even know what that is?
We know what it is,
Okay.
mainly from consuming American uh, movies
Garbage.
and
Yeah.
pop culture. But yeah, we have similar sort of
Yeah.
thing.
My favorite cheesecake from the Cheesecake Factory is Oreo cheesecake. But anyways, side note.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think there is a distinction here. I don't think that there are there probably are, again, this is beyond my scope of practice as a health coach, but in my personal opinion, I'm sure there are people who have um, legitimate addictions around certain types of foods, right?
Mm.
Um, and just like if you're addicted to alcohol or drugs, the best approach is to abstain 100% from those foods.
Yeah.
Because if not, you'll have a relapse, right? And it ends up very badly for you, right? So, I think that is 100% a real thing. And in those cases, like, yeah, you should probably not eat, those foods that trigger you, whether it's carbohydrates or, anything else, right? Um, but if you're, I also think that people say, the word addiction is used in a not really in a medical sense of like, I'm addicted to whatever potato chips or whatever, right?
Mm.
And therefore, all carbohydrates are bad. There isn't probably a person in the world that isn't a, quote unquote, gets all the pleasure centers in their brain go off when they eat a potato chip. Like, I mean,
Yeah. That's what
that's
it's
just
for.
because that's because we're human.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean if you were to eat a plain baked potato that you would have the same
Mm.
reaction. They both contain carbohydrates, but your reaction to eating a plain baked potato and eating potato chips is going to be completely completely different. I'm willing to bet, right?
It's an
So you
interesting.
can't lump these highly processed forms of carbohydrates into the same thing, the same group as a whole food carbohydrate source that hasn't been processed, because they usually almost always result in two completely different reactions um, from people. So but I think that they do get lumped together. A plain baked potato with nothing on it, no butter, salt, cheese, bacon, anything, right, gets put in the same group as potato chips, and they're both just as evil as each other, right? And in reality, I think that
Mm.
that's not true.
No, I think that's right. And yeah, I think people feel guilty, they kind of eat, you eat your Oreo cheesecake, whatever, some combination of massively high amounts of energy. And
Mm.
as you say, it lights up every part of your brain, and people feel guilty. They go, "Oh, I'm addicted to carbs. I just can't get enough of this stuff." It's like, no,
Mm.
that's being a human. I mean,
Yeah.
that we're designed. There's a big part of our brain saying, "Hey, get fat, get fat. This is how you survive." And if we
Yep.
haven't
Yeah.
shaken that off, your genes are
Yep.
responsible for getting us out of the cradle of life in East Africa and up into the cold climates of Northern Europe.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why we're here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's
people
it's
feel bad
exactly
about
right.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. They shouldn't feel bad about it, and if they really want to understand why that they shouldn't feel bad about it, I really suggest they read Wired to Eat by Rob Wolf. Like, that
Yeah,
kind of explains why your brain and why you want these foods, and it's okay to want them. Everyone wants them. It's not a
yeah,
big deal. Like, there's the outliers that are like, I really have no craving for whatever ever. That's cool, but most of us are like, yeah, if you put a piece of cheesecake in front of us, we're going to eat it and we're really going to enjoy it. And we're meant
yeah,
to, because that is what we needed to do to survive hundreds of thousands of years, right? If you put something delicious that had a lot of calories in front of us, we ate it, and we ate as much as we possibly could, that was available to us, because we didn't know when that food was going to come back again, or if we're going to get any food for for a few weeks, right? So we just did what we had to do.
I think it's really cool that if nothing else, what this podcast has achieved is to make you and I both really want a slice of Oreo cheesecake.
I'm gonna have to, yeah, we're gonna have to
Going right now.
satisfy. Yeah, I'm gonna have to
Going right
satisfy
now.
that career.
So look, we talked about diet in terms of any other big levers. We've talked about sleep, movement, exercise, diet. Um, we've talked about social connection. Are there big kind of fundamental mistakes that you see people making other than kind of not doing these things? Do people come to you and say, hey, you know, Ryan, I need your help and you're going to be thrilled because I'm eating 500 calories a day? And, you know, what are the mistakes? Where are you like, whoa, no, hold on there, Nelly?
Oh, you know, one of the common ones I see, I think, is I see a lot of people eating pretty low protein, not eating enough protein. Um, you know, I see people trying to fast a lot longer than they need to, or think that fasting is the answer to their problems or their questions.
Yeah.
You know, those two things alone, like, both result in like dysregulated appetite as a downstream effect, right? The protein is just so satiating that they don't eat enough, and then they wonder why they're hungry later on, or they're losing a lot of muscle mass.
Yeah. How much
Or
protein
they're
should people be eating?
So this is the age-old debate, you know, what's the right number here? I generally just go with, if you're not, you know, like really obese, just go with 1 gram per pound of body weight. Most people are going to undershoot that. The 1 gram per pound is probably more than you need, but most people undershoot it anyways. So it'll probably put them in a spot where they actually, you know, get enough. So there's a nice buffer there. If they eat more than they need, that, you know, there hasn't been any science to prove that that's a bad thing either. So unless you're, you know, if you have kidney issues to begin with, then that could be an issue. But outside of that state, you're probably okay eating more than you need to. And it's certainly much better than eating less than you need to. So you know, that's my general recommendation. You can get more fancy if you know your lean body mass and etc. and stuff like that. But most people don't. So we just kind of go with, if you're not obese, then do 1 gram per pound of body weight. Or if you are obese, do 1 gram per pound of your ideal body weight, what you want to be. Just keeps it very simple. Yeah, and that just helps people kind of regulate their appetite, keeps muscle mass on them. And then from a fasting point of view, I see a lot of people who are like, you know, I'm gonna fast. You know, I don't eat until lunch, or I only eat 1 meal a day. And then they come to me and they're like, oh, you know, all of a sudden when I start eating, like, I just can't stop. Like, I'm it's time to eat, and I've stopped, and I've finally decided I want to eat something, and like I just can't wait to finish cooking the meal that I'm going to eat, and I'm like snacking and rummaging through the cabinets and all the stuff, and I'm like, yeah, because you haven't eaten all day and you're hungry. You know, so of course you can't wait to finish cooking the meal, and you can't stop once you started. So let's try like having breakfast, you know. Let's just keep you a little bit more well fed throughout the day, instead of letting that hunger sensation build up until, you know, mid-afternoon, and all of a sudden you're just ravenous and you can't satisfy your hunger, right? Those are two common mistakes I see.
And it's particularly, you know, with very active people, isn't it? You get this kind of thing. You get these people who are very active, alpha kind of personalities, high achieving. They're going to exercise more than other people. They're going to lift heavier. They're going to run faster and further, and they're going to fast longer. And they're going to, they're going to eat. They're going to, in every way, screw this down. You've talked before about this energy crisis. Could you just explain a little bit about how that works?
this whole idea of how much energy you have available is kind of a passion of mine, because it's really where a lot of my health struggles had originated from, and what led me down the path of being a health coach, or wanting to become a health coach in the future, because I wanted to help people kind of avoid the mistakes that I ran into. And basically what I see a lot of time is people moving to a more ancestral diet, low carb or keto diet, or maybe they're just moving to a plain old ancestral diet. They're just eating a whole bunch of more whole foods than they were before, and trying to improve their health. And at the same time, they have ambitious goals of being an athlete, or they're just a super active person, and they end up eating a far fewer calories, because just by default, a whole foods ancestrally aligned diet is going to be less calorically dense than kind of a standard Western diet. And they initially might feel great. They might lose a little bit of weight. Their body composition improves. Everything's feeling good, and then all of a sudden, everything just kind of goes south. Right? Their athletic performance declines. They have mood issues. Their sleep goes out the window. Their cognitive ability goes south. Maybe they even start to notice weird things with their sex drive, or if you're a female, your menstrual cycle, and they start to have all these kind of weird things that they can't explain. They're like, oh, my diet's much better than it was before, but everything else just seems to go south, and lots of times it has to do with the fact that they're just in this low energy state, that they feel like they're eating enough, they're full, they're satiated, but the amount of energy they're expending is mismatched. They're expending far more calories than they are taking in, and that ends up having a bunch of hormonal issues, and the body starts to try to survive, basically by shutting things down and turning off processes that aren't needed for survival. And that's where they start to run into problems, like I did.
Yeah, I did too. I was good for a while, and then I just went off a cliff. And
Yeah.
I can remember just freezing my ass off in a warm room,
Yeah.
sitting in a chair, and just thinking, I just can't be bothered to stand up and do anything. And you
Yeah.
think, and yet every day I was going into the gym and doing these 90-minute I had this thing in my head. I was going to do a 1,000 rep circuit, and it was every other day, 90 minutes. But then I was eating like 1,300 calories or so. I don't know what I was eating, but it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And it's all good for a bit, and you use your fat, but when you run out of fat, you're just done. And then I weighed myself, and I weighed 55 kilos, and I realized that I was eating my own body in order to do these things.
Yeah. It's terrible. I had a very similar experience. I would go out for a run, and I could run forever, and then I'd come back and I'd just be a useless piece of garbage. I had a young daughter who was, wanted to play, and I had no energy to get off the couch, right? And my mood just sucked, my sleep sucked.
Yeah.
And that was it. And you know, it, you kind of just feel like garbage, and it's a hard thing to like just wrap your brain around and be like, you're doing everything right. I'm doing what all these experts say. I'm eating this healthy diet, and yeah, you gotta have to come to a hard realization that it's probably your diet and the amount of energy you have. And
Yeah.
I had, when I finally found someone to work with, they measured my insulin, and it was unmeasurable.
Yeah, mine was too.
The lab couldn't come back with any measurable insulin in my blood.
Yeah.
Which, if you were to, based on the messaging that you hear, in the low carb and keto space, you'd be like, oh, you've hit no insulin. That's great. And I'm like, well, I've never felt worse in my entire life. So is that really true? Right. So yeah, there's a U-shaped curve to most things, and I was on the bad end of that curve.
Yeah, it's very familiar. I mean, so I mean, this is interest. It's an interesting thing because you've mentioned a couple of times the family and your daughter and all this kind of stuff. And I'm in the same boat. And I think sometimes there's a line to be drawn between dedication and selfishness, where we see these. I mean, like, so for example, I mean, it's common obviously in our culture to look at all these guys who are doing incredible things. Maybe they're trekking to the North Pole, or maybe they're these kind of guys that climb mountains with no trousers on, or whatever it is they're doing. And we look at them and we go, oh my God, that guy's amazing. Or actually, the military guys a lot. Oh, these guys are incredible. So it's amazing what they do. They're heroes.
Mm.
But a lot of these people are unbelievably selfish. The things that they're choosing to do in order to, and I accept, push the human race forward, which they are. They are
Mm.
necessarily, by virtue of opportunity cost, sacrificing the family life and whatever. Do you find as a health coach that you sometimes need to say to people, look, you spend some time at home with your family. You are not making yourself better by not being home because you're desperate to run 18 miles or whatever it is. Have you battled with that yourself?
Mm. Certainly something I battled with myself. I a few years ago, I got in my mind that I was going to do an ultra distance obstacle course race, and I did it. And I completed it. And after I finished it, I decided that at this point in my life, I'm not going to do another one, because the amount of training it took to do that was just too much. It was too much time for me to be spending away from my family, away from my job, and out there on the trails at this point in my life. But maybe when I'm, my kids are older and things are a bit more relaxed, and yeah, I might consider doing it again, but at this point, probably not, right?
Mm.
And it's funny because I, depending on who I'm talking to, I need to have different conversations, right? For the hard charging person that's spending so much time, thinking more and more and more is better. Oftentimes it's like, pushing the brakes on them and be like, okay, let's take a little bit of break here. You only need to do 20 minutes today. You don't need to be out there for an hour and a half. Like, it's going to be okay if you're not, destroying yourself today. And there's other people where you really need to, like, all right, well, how can we organize your life so that you prioritize yourself, and you actually can get to the gym to do a workout, right? Like, there's far more people on that end of the spectrum where it's like they put everyone else first and they don't prioritize themselves, and that leads to health issues. Then there are people that prioritize themselves too much and spend too much time in the gym and too much time focusing on XYZ, optimizing their health. um there's this happy medium there, and I think there's people that sit at both ends of the curve. I always tell my wife that she's like this rare oddity where she sits right in the middle. She knows exactly what the right amount is, like, just intuitively. She knows when to take a break. She knows when to go out and exercise. She knows, how to moderate her diet based on what she's doing. She's a completely intuitive person, but she's like this unicorn. Like, I've never seen anyone else like it. But yeah, so it's definitely something you need to be mindful of. And depending on the person, your personality, your type A, super hard charter, like, yeah, it's probably okay to dial things back. Take a break.
This gives me an amazing idea. So you're a tech guy. You're a computer programmer, aren't you? So let's make an app. And what you do is you put in the amount you train per week. And then you put in, like, you have to answer like a commitments questionnaire. Do you have kids? Do you have a partner? Blah, 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 your job, whatever. And then what you do is it analyzes every day what you're doing. And there's a little lever that swings across, a little arrow that swings. And on one side, it says, bastard, and on the other side it says martyr, and it just swings between the two, telling you where you are, where your barometer is. I mean, so you as I say, you're a tech guy, you're a computer guy, and I know you like to track and stuff like that. I'm a little kind of anti it because I think it kind of gets people into a funny place when they track too much, or at least it got me into a funny place. But and I don't really want to, we all know the advantages of tracking endless, or the disadvantages, but I'm interested to know, where do you think it could go? What do you think could be done in terms of tracking some of these things? Is there some interesting place it could go?
I think whenever you track something, it needs to be associated with some type of action. Like, you need to know how to interpret what you're looking at and then know what to do with the data you're looking at, right? So a good example is, like, everyone's all into like a CGM, right? Like, being able to continuously monitor your blood sugar is like the new hot thing, right? And for those people who might not know, a CGM is just a continuous glucose monitor. It tells you what your blood sugar is in near real time. It's like 5 to 15-minute increments or something like that, right? And everyone is kind of, talking about these things and how they can improve your health, etc., right? I think it's great. Like, I wore one for 3 or 4 months, right? Like, I thought it was super interesting. I loved it, right? But for the average person, if you don't know how to interpret that data, what you're looking at, or what to do with it, what use is it, right? Like, it doesn't make any difference, right? And the same thing is, like, if you could say about like tracking your HRV, your heart rate variability, which is a sign of stress, how much stress you're under. Same thing can be said about tracking your weight. Like, if you don't know what's causing your weight to go up or down, what good is that number, right?
It could be muscle, could be fat, right?
Yeah, it's like looking at, your blood draw, right, from your doctor. You don't know what any of those numbers mean, or if something says high or low or whatever, you don't know how to fix it or what that means. Like, it's no good to you, right? So it's being able to take the data and actually do something with it, that is most meaningful, right? So, like, I think CGMs will become super useful when, something's going to have to look at that data and be like, okay, Ryan, here's what you need to do, right? Whether that's a person, like a health coach, or that's in the future, maybe some type of machine learning or artificial intelligence, which I find that to be way, way, way in the future. But yeah, like, you have to have some actionable information associated with that data and know what it means, right? I think people are like, oh, the thing people are excited about is, like, Apple's rumored to be able to, working on like CGM like functionality in their Apple Watch. And I keep on telling people, I'm like, yeah, great, but like, the average person wearing an Apple Watch has no idea what that means, or even cares, or knows what to do with that data. Like, Apple's gonna, and they're pretty good at this, like, Apple's gonna have to come up with some kind of way of providing you actionable information from that data, that's meaningful for you, for it to be useful, right? So I think tracking is good, as long as you're tracking for the right reasons and you know what to do with that data, and it's not stressing you out beyond belief. Like, some people get super stressed tracking their food. Some people get super stressed tracking their weight. Some people, really, if they were to have a CGM on and they saw their blood sugar go up to 140, they're gonna, they're ready to call 911, right? Like, that's not good, right? Same thing. Like, tracking sleep is another thing. Like, that can really mess with people depending on who you are. Like, or I love the Oura Ring. I think it's great. I like to look at the numbers. But if you're having sleep troubles and the Oura Ring is telling you you're having crappy sleep every single night, and that's making it impossible for you to get a good night's sleep, take the damn ring off. Don't wear the ring. Like, it's not helping you, right? It's not providing you any useful information, right? So, while I'm a huge fan of it, like, it has to be actionable and it has to not cause you stress. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. I think, it's so true in terms of the value of that information. You know, we've all been on these blood work fishing trips where you get this huge raft of numbers, and then you sit there looking at ones which are in and out of range, really with no clue of how often they change or how much they change. And then you know, you say to yourself, oh, this isn't good, I need to somehow improve this. You know, people terrify themselves, you know, with these tests, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So interpretation is the key, but of course doctors often don't know the answers. So I guess what you're saying is it's going to come down to sort of specialist private companies maybe developing real actionable ways to look at some of these bits of data.
Yeah, I think in the future that's going to be the case. I think that you're going to have specialists, or you know, hopefully in the future we can develop some type of algorithms that can piece some of the stuff together to help kind of lead you in the right direction. And even then, I feel like there's so much, you know, around health. There's so much individuality and personality that comes into play that a machine or computer is not going to be able to account for. That I feel like it's still going to be just kind of like general guidance, and you're really gonna, you know, it's not going to be, you know, prescriptive in any mean for most things. So, you know, what I encourage people to do is to use tech in track stuff if they're okay with that, if that works for them. But ultimately their own intuition and subjective experience always overrides it, right? Like it's always the most important. So for example, I don't care if you eat a bowl full of white rice and the CGM says your blood sugar went to 115. Great, you stayed within range. But if you feel like you want to take a nap after every time you eat a bowl of white rice, don't eat the white rice. Like, it doesn't make you feel good, right? Like, I don't care what the CGM says. You don't feel right after you eat it, so don't do it, right? So like your subjective experience, the way you feel, what you know, how you perform always overrides the tech in all cases, right?
Yeah, that's a really good bit of advice.
And once you can get once you get to that point, then you can use the tech to inform your decisions. But the real information is coming from within. It's coming from within yourself, and you don't need to rely on it anymore, right? Like I can look at a sizable sweet potato, and I know roughly how much I'm supposed to eat, right? Like I don't need to enter the exact grams into Chronometer to figure out how many grams of carbs are in it, to know whether I should eat that amount, right? So I can go out and be without a scale, without my food tracker, and eat, you know, the right amount of food. But ultimately, the tracking for a little bit using Chronometer got me to that point, so I could, you know, judge the right amount of food.
Yeah, so it's like you use these things, you track your HRV so that you get to learn which workouts deplete you the most, and then you kind of don't even need to look at it. You're like, okay, yesterday I did heavy deadlifts. I'm probably going to be half speed today, so I'm going to do something more gentle.
Yeah.
All right, some quick fire questions. You've talked about the importance of routine. Morning routine. What's your morning routine?
I have a good one, I guess. So I wake up in the morning, I go to the bathroom, I check my HRV, I head downstairs, I meditate for 10 minutes. I then do 10 minutes of mobility. I then do around like 20 minutes of like kind of just like low level cardio. So I have a rower, a skier, and a treadmill, and a fan bike, one of those Rogue Echo bike torture device in my basement. So I'll hop on those for a little bit and just do some easy, gentle movement, you know, just to get my body going. Come upstairs, get the kids' lunches packed, get them off to school, come back, make myself breakfast, and start my day. Start working.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, do you have any particular lifestyle hacks in inverted commas that you use?
I do like cold showers.
Mm,
Um, I do it more for the mental benefits than anything else. I think doing something hard every day that feels uncomfortable is good. Good for the human being, not for everyone. I don't know. My biggest hack is like walking. Like I love
yeah,
walking.
yeah.
Just walking outside, taking a break, just being outside. That's literally like if you ask my wife, like that's the one thing I do like consistently all the time is just walking.
Yeah, you and I are the same person, I think. I walk. I'll take any excuse to walk,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
do the cold showers as well every day. And I don't like getting in, but I love getting out. And that sounds obvious, but actually, you feel amazing and warm and good to go after that. And I don't feel like that after a hot bath. It actually feels
Mm,
uncomfortable on my skin now. Hot water, like
yeah,
I feel claustrophobic in the bath.
yeah, yeah. I have a sauna too. I'm looking if I have a sauna too. And so you know, I don't know if I prefer one or the other, but there's certainly um, the mental aspect of turning that shower cold
Mm.
and doing it purposefully is much harder than getting in the sauna.
Yeah, the sauna's nice. We have one of those portable ones that's like a kind of cross between a used condom and a suit bag. And you kind of sit in it on a towel, sweating,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's kind of horrible. Yeah, I'm eking every last bit of life out of that thing. Um, any little bit of research that you've seen recently that you think is particularly interesting?
Yeah, I was just listening to a podcast with two of the people that I probably respect the most. One of the two of three people that I respect the most in this, as far as like scientists, Dr. Tommy Wood and Dr. Ben House, and
Mm.
they were discussing whether um, um, you know saturated fat caused heart disease, like this age old debate of saturated fat causes heart disease, and they were discussing this new study where they put these people in caloric deficit, their cholesterol numbers kind of improved, they dropped, and then they returned them to caloric maintenance, and fascinating enough, the some people's cholesterol stayed the same, some people's continued to decline, and some people's can continue to go up. And I think this age old debate around what's good for cholesterol, whether cholesterol is good or bad, or fat is good or bad for your cholesterol numbers. I think that the more and more research that comes out about that is just like we have no idea.
Yeah, we've
It's
got
going to
no
be
clue.
it's going to be completely individualized. Some people respond in some better in some ways. Some people respond worse in some ways when they eat more fat. It seems to be, you can look at the average and the mean, and the mean and the average might say, on average, people might respond not so good to adding a lot more saturated fat when they're in a caloric maintenance or surplus. But then there's other people that don't respond that way, right?
Mm.
So it's like, I don't know, that whole space of around cholesterol and what's right, what's good, what's bad, what leads to heart disease, what doesn't, is really fascinating. And I think we just have a lot to learn in that space.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a minefield. I love Tommy Wood too. I think he's just such a smart guy. Everything you hear with that guy, he's so measured and says, well, actually, look, this is
Yeah.
he's a great he's true north, isn't he? Like if you get a little bit skewed with these wild ideas, he'll always just pull you back into a kind of, well, this is sort of what we know and what we don't know. So, you know,
Yep.
he's
Yep.
awesome
Completely
like
agree.
that.
One of my favorite people.
You've been posting recently that you're doing a grip competition. Is that just to do with obstacle course, your fitness for obstacle course racing? Is that your motivation there?
So kind of my so shout out to my coach, Dr. Mike T. Nelson.
Mm.
He's kind of got me into this whole grip competition thing. And originally it was because, we were using various different grip training tools for my goal of obstacle course racing. And now it's kind of in the winter. Most races aren't happening right now, but there was a grip competition that was coming up, and he's like, "Hey, I think you'd be really, you'd have a decent fighting chance at competing in one of these because you've been doing the training anyways, and your grip is really strong." So yeah, I have. It's this Saturday, so
Amazing.
Yeah, the final stretch here, so I'm gonna be doing it. Yeah.
If anybody wants to find out what grip training looks like, it's not just, you don't just sort of stand there with a chicken in each fist and garrote it. There's all kinds of strangely shaped bars and things that Ryan uses. So where can people find you? Where can they see your grip videos and indeed contact you with regards to health coaching and all that stuff?
Yeah, so the best place, there's a couple places. So for like all you want to see all my weird grip stuff, my lifts, stuff like that, exercises that I do personally, you can go to my personal Instagram page, which is Ryan Jason Baxter. That's where all kind of like my personal stuff is. The health coaching side of what I do, you can get more information on Instagram at RJB Health Coaching. And I have a website, rjbhealth.coach. And it's not .com, it's .coach, literally .coach. If you go to that website, at the top, there is a link that says newsletter. You jump on, click that link and enter your email address and sign up for the newsletter, and you'll get all the blog posts, newsletters, videos, all the stuff that I put out as far as health coaching from there. And that way you can kind of keep up with what I'm putting out from a health coaching perspective without having to stalk me on social media if that's not your thing either. And yeah, if you're interested at all around health coaching, you can reach out to me via direct message. There's a button if you go to rjbhealth.coach on my homepage to schedule a discovery call, and we can talk more about that. But yeah, I'm always happy to interact. If anyone wants to message me, direct message me, either on my personal Instagram page or the health coaching page, either way, always reach out. I'm happy to chat.
Ryan, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to stalk you. I'm going to stalk you on social media and everywhere else.
Well, I already stalk you, Jack, with all your amazing cooking demonstrations. So
we can stalk each other. Everyone needs a stalker.
Yeah.
So look, thank you for your time. This is so interesting to talk to you, and I just throwing these questions at you with no preparation at all, and you of course came up with some amazing and very informative answers, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time.
Appreciate it, Jeff.
Thanks, mate.
That's it for now. Come and find me on Instagram at Ruston's Boneyard and at www.rustonsboneyard.com. Keep cooking.